Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. Okay, once more, I want to thank everybody who has joined us for this 48th edition of the Southern Cameroons International Town Hall. For our guests coming, if anybody has anything they want to bring to the attention of the Southern Cameroons community, I see a hand is up. That's Powerful Kimber. Powerful, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, you may. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be home with brothers and sisters. I am driving, so you may get some noise, so I will try to. So I just have a suggestion. Just consider a satellite out in the sky. That satellite is looking and seeing a lot on the ground. If you get that picture in your mind, you will see that we in the diaspora act like that satellite because we get more information on ground zero than people who are on ground zero. And how can we utilize this information from ground zero to help save lives that our people are dying on ground zero? In most of the discussion on the talk group, you see people get engaged in the diaspora on trivial things, insulting each other. Okay. A good example that I can just mention is a few weeks back, I saw one of our comrades who was killed in Yaoundé because he wore the traditional attire. And that is something that we use the media to alert our people immediately that, you know what, our traditional regalia, it is making us public enemy number one. So you should be able to know that so as to blend with the population. That's exactly some of the things that we, the media, should be able to play that and watch around and see what we in the diaspora can give information that can help our people on ground zero. And then secondly, it's also good to look about La République's strategy of warfare now. I grew up in Jombe, Penja, Lum, that was the heart of Makiza. And if you realize, if you leave Manjo or Gomsamba passing through Manjo, Ndonge, Lum Shankie, Penja, Jombe, and Banga, you see that all those cities, all those towns, the population is on the road. And La République's target was to bomb the suburbs so as to drive the farmers and the people to the roadside so that the army can easily control them. I remember in Jombe, we used to leave the house at 4 a.m. and went to farm. And by 12 noon, we should be back. And coming back, you see how they have burned houses. And they drive people along the road so that they can monitor and control. But we should be able to articulate this, that La République has not been able to successfully done that in Ambazonia because we own the territory. That is why you see they have spent most of their time burning villages so that they can as well drive our people to the city and then render those places powerless for them. And you equally know another strategy earlier was that they will destroy the crops in the farm. That was a strategy by starving our people. And even I get calls, I get information from ground zero that they will, our people will leave, go to Bamenda and the town and buy things to go back to the suburb. La République will intentionally stop them and seize the food so as to starve them. But these are things that we should be able to understand and communicate with the people on the ground. And if we project that image, they will be able to tell us a lot that we can actually go on the air and sensitize them. That is our role in the West. And then an elderly part told me about what Lele Lafrique is doing in Bamenda. When he is traveling to the suburbs, he goes around with his own group of people will pick up. These suburbs, these villagers will bring out goats, chickens, and all this livestock and food. they will impoverish these people, and then on the weekends you will see those his people, the Bangladesh people that travel with him. They are the ones who will be selling the goats and the fowl. So you see all these strategies are on the ground, and this is exactly what we should be listening to people on the ground and use the media to be able to give them information that is vital now that can help save lives. Sometimes we get lost in the historical narration of what has already happened and what we already know, and mostly talking really to ourselves. So I really feel that, sorry, I may talk too much, but I think that it is very, very vital. We don't want to lose lives carelessly. We need to be giving information, conscious that that information can help our people on the ground, because we in the diaspora, we sit behind keyboards and talk in the comfort of our offices and our rooms and not know that these guys are in the kitchen and the kitchen is burning, not really just hot, but we should be able to get this information and pass it on to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pak Kimbang. Thank you for that. And it's well taken. I see there is another hand up. Okay, that was just a thumbs up from the Secretariat. Okay, Secretariat 1, Dr. Fontem, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think the point that Powerful Kimbang has just made is a very pertinent point. But I think that is also the reason why at the start of the program, of the town hall, we usually have opportunities for people to bring up these issues, because most of these issues eventually form part of the agenda of future meetings, because the goal of the town hall is also to educate, and the dynamics of the conflict, the conflict is evolving. And so as time goes on, we need to educate people on its dynamics. So I think that point that he has made is a very critical point. And which I would suggest that the Secretariat consider some of the issues that are incident to this conflict, and then we put them down and itemize them and have a broad-based discussion. Our people are increasingly following up the discussions on the town hall. If you see from the day, every time that we finish the town hall meeting, you see the numbers on Facebook. When you go back later, you see that people who did not have time or who did not have the opportunity will go back. There are others who watch on Facebook, on SCBC, and from time to time they call to give their input and so on and so forth. So, which is a good thing. Now, one of the other things that I want to say, which adds to what Powerful has just said, and which is going unnoticed, is the fact that La République is dismantling plantations. La République is dismantling plantations and giving these plantations out as real estate. They've given lands out to people to buy, and since they have impoverished our people so badly, it is they who come back to buy the lands. And so we are heading for a situation whereby in future strategic axis, which used to be plantations in Southern Cameroons, and which particularly under the CDC, and which have been cleared since, I believe we all know that the CDC has been transferred to, the headquarters of the CDC has been transferred to Yaoundé. Over time, they have been training Francophones in the CDC. At one point, the director of administration was a Francophone. The finance section, we have Francophones. So they brought in a flock of them to groom them on how to run the CDC when they eventually transfer it to Yaoundé and kick us out. So, they are gradually shutting down our plantations, so that by the time we retake our country and are in full control, what used to be plantations that were generating billions for the country will now be residential areas that will not be able to bring in that kind of money for infrastructural development and create jobs as the CDC used to do. So what I'm saying is that we need to draw the attention of our people to those kinds of development and also work out a plan so that we anticipate how this problem will be handled in the near future when Southern Cameroons becomes an independent country. It is a very critical point, and I think that the town hall needs to put its telescope on it. Thank you very much. I yield.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fontaine, for adding to what Pa Kimbeng said. We are about 4 minutes to the top of the hour. Secretariat, I don't know if our guests are in.
Can I just compliment something with what
yes,
Dr.
real quick, Pa Kimbeng, because we have to welcome our guests. Yes, if you can do it in a minute.
It's very, very crucial. Dr. Fontaine put his finger on the point. And you should equally, we should understand that this generation, that the reason why they are so furious on the ground is they have grown up in Bamenda. Most of the land is occupied by foreigners. And then when you ask you talk to some of the Bamlikes, they have the audacity to tell us that they came and bailed Bamenda. These people came and looted our banks and got the money, invested there, and bought our land. They have the arrogance to stand even during the day and say that they are our friends. But at night, they are the very ones who are funding the struggle. So, I mean, what Dr. Fontaine has said is very, very crucial. And I would also call on the Secretariat, invite people who have these ideas. Sometimes we have the strategy of only inviting people with big titles. We have to change the scenario and diversify. Let common people come and share their experience, like what we have brought this morning about the strategy, what goes on the ground. Because what goes on the ground is not studied in the classroom. We hear from live people on the ground. What will make people at home give us more information, because we stand in a better place to get that information and spread it.
Thank you, Pa Kimbeng. We don't bring titles, Pa Fru Kimbeng. We bring people who are willing and have something to offer. So if you have somebody, because you always say this thing about titles, it's not about titles. We have brought all range of people here. We brought anybody, you can name it. So if you have anybody who can come in, we don't want to denigrate anybody because they took themselves to any academic level. So if we have anybody who has added value to the education of our people, they are most welcome to the town hall.
Mr. Moderator, I'm sorry, I take that language back. It's not on the show. I was just talking generally, the mentality of us, Ambazonian and Africans. It's not about the studio. You have been doing an excellent job, and you have brought so many diverse people, and we should also point that out.
Thank you.
This program has been excellent.
Thank you. So, Secretariat, I don't know if our guests are in. We're expecting Pa Augustine Dangam and Professor John Fobanjong. A brief bio to introduce Professor John Fobanjong to our Southern Cameroons audience at this 48th edition of the Southern Cameroons International Town Hall. Professor John Fobanjong is a native of Ambazonia, born and bred in the era when our homeland was administratively attached to Nigeria. He attended primary school in Limbe and Boya and secondary school in Bamenda. Right after completing secondary school, he was recruited in the intelligence services of the national security and served in Chang, Douala, and Yaoundé under the Ahidjo regime. Conscious and aware early on of the marginalized status of Southern Cameroonians, he left in the late 1970s to pursue further studies in the United States. He completed doctoral studies in political science in 1989 and returned to Cameroon in the summer of 1991. The marginalization of Southern Cameroonians had become so unbearable, there was a call for a nationwide lockdown. Professor Fobanjong was forced to make an immediate U-turn where he returned to the United States and was offered a teaching position at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. He currently teaches at the University of Massachusetts and is determined to never again board a plane for Cameroon unless it is a plane that is taking him to the Ambazonian airfields in Tiko, in Bali, or in Manfe. Professor John Fobanjong, you're welcome to the Southern Cameroons International Town Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, my fellow Ambazonians. Thank you, my fellow compatriots. I'm delighted to be with you here and to commiserate with you. I was invited, I was charged with sharing with you my experiences growing up in the era of Southern Cameroons, when Southern Cameroons was still not attached to French Cameroon. I was born in that era when Southern Cameroons was still under the British trusteeship administration. It was administered indirectly through Nigeria. And I've had the experience of living under Southern Cameroons as annexed to Nigeria, under Southern Cameroons as a self-determined, self-governed state, and in Southern Cameroons as part of this current regime. So I've had experiences that go through, I think, 3 eras. The era with Nigeria, the era when we were not attached to either of the 2 parties, and then the era when we were attached to French Cameroon. Every country in the world has an era that they can point to and refer to as the golden era. Whether it's Greece, Egypt, Persia, Ghana, Mali, and even the British Empire, every people, when they look at their history, they can point to an era that they would call the era of the golden era. The golden era. It is that era that brings pride to them. It is that era that made them feel proud about their history. It is an era when they had great achievements. They did things that make them proud and would make their future generations proud. So the era between 1954 and 1972 for Southern Cameroons, for Ambazonia, is that era that I would like to refer to as the golden era. It is an era when we had the experience of self-governance, self-determination, an era when we were abandoned more or less by the British, abandoned by the international community more or less, because the UN, when we were handed over to the British, the expectation was that the British would administer us and prepare us for independence. The British failed to do that. The British, out of, I would say, greed, out of, apparently they had a bigger catch next door to us. They had big Nigeria, so they didn't care about us. So they felt that it would just be easy to attach us to Nigeria and forget, for them, they felt that we didn't quite have much to offer. A small territory with, for them at the time, no natural resources, not realizing that they were actually making a big mistake. So they abandoned us and tried to get us administered through Eastern Nigeria. We were with Eastern Nigeria and we realized that we would not maximize, we would not achieve our political aspirations. So we pulled out. our leaders decided to organize and walk out of the Eastern Nigerian House of Assembly, came back and formed a government composed of indigenous rulers, Ndeli, then later Foncha, then later on Joa, without the help of the international community. And so between 1954 and 1961, we actually had experience in democratic self-governance without the help of the UN, without the help of any major Western nation. So we're democratic, a democratic system that was developed and modeled after the British Westminster system. And it went well, two chambers, the House of Chiefs and the House of Parliament. And they went well. There was stability, there was economic growth, prosperity. And we, for a time, were an envy of other countries in the region. African history makes us believe that the first country in Africa that became independent and exercised self-governance was Ghana. But in reality, if you look at it closely, we actually became independent, or rather, we were the first country in the region to have self-experience in self-governance, to have experienced self-governance, democratic self-governance, because ours began in 1954. Ghana did not become independent until 1957. So we had more experience in self-governance, earlier experience in self-governance than Ghana. Now, fast forward to 1961. There is also the myth that French Cameroon became independent before Southern Cameroons. Why? Because the dates, it is reported that French Cameroon became independent on January 1st, 1960. And we purportedly became independent October 1st, 1961. But in reality, if you look at, if independence means taking the affairs of your state into your hands and electing your own government and getting governed by your own people, by your own indigenous citizens, I would say that Southern Cameroons was actually more experienced and became independent before French Cameroon, because in 1961 and even up until the early 70s, you still had French technocrats, French bureaucrats working in Yaoundé. You had French advisors in almost every ministry in Yaoundé. Francophone Cameroon had a president, Aijo, who was supposedly a native of French Cameroon, but in reality, he was put in office. Everyone knows this, by the French. So he was actually there to serve the interests of France. But when you look back at Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, the leaders that we had in office, from Ndeli to Foncha to Joa, were actually put in power by us, Southern Cameroonians. And so in terms of self-governance, self-determination, genuine self-determination, we actually had more experience and were more advanced in democratic self-governance than French Cameroon. Now, if we were to form a union, if that union, the so-called union that the UN and the British tried to force us into, if it were going to be a union that would be based on democratic experience, democratic self-governance, the senior partner in that federation should have been us, British Southern Cameroons. The senior partner, the president of the federation should have come from Southern Cameroons. Why? Because we had more experience in democratic self-governance than French Cameroon. Every French Cameroonian who is educated and who understands politics would tell you that Aidjo was never elected by the people of French Cameroon. Before Aidjo, there was Albert Mbida, who was prime minister from I think southeastern part of French Cameroon. But because he was apparently a lot more emancipated and campaigned for genuine independence for French Cameroon, he was pushed aside. And then there were the Umnyobes, who genuinely wanted to push for independence, genuine independence for French Cameroon. He too was eliminated. And so Aidjo put in place and allowed to protect French people. So we would have been the senior partners in that union, and it is us who truly should have led that federation and brought it to true democracy. Now, on to the experience, my experience as a citizen of Ambazonia, Southern Cameroon, between the era, the 50s and the 1960s. Yeah, during that period, I sent earlier this morning, actually, I sent an almanac to Dr. Follefak. I would like us to, if we can, share it, please. I sent a copy to, I think, through Dr. Follefak.
The secretary
and Francis.
is going to post it.
If you can share that, yes.
On the screen now.
Okay. That almanac, you can see it, okay. This almanac was published in 1965 when Joa was prime minister. Now, if you look at the composition of that cabinet, you would see that the cabinet is balanced. You would see that, you would see equity, balance between ministers from the southern region and ministers from the northern region. I tried to pull up the almanac, the almanac for Fonchal's government. That too, actually, there was actually more equity in that government than in Joa's. There were actually more ministers from the southern region than from the northern region. Particularly the Minister of Education in the early 60s. A gentleman was called Mengot. I think it's A.D. Mengot. He was from Mamfe, and he was always on the radio, making announcements and announcing names of scholarship winners for Europe, for Britain. And at the time, the early years in the 1960s, the British were giving Southern Cameroons a lot of scholarships to study in Europe. And this minister worked very hard to get a lot of Southern Cameroonians to study, award scholarships to a lot of Southern Cameroonians. And there was balance, there was equity, fairness. The fairness that we do not have today in the current arrangement, the current union with French Cameroon. If you look at the composition of Aidjo's government and Bia's government, you would see that both regimes lacked equity. They lacked balance. They did not have ministers from the southern regions. If you counted them in the Aidjo times, there were maybe one or two. Then in the Bia regime, maybe one or two. The ministers from the southern, by southern region, I'm talking about the region from Mamfe going down south, maybe one or two. But under Aidjo, under Foncha, there were at least 6, 7 ministers from the southern region, and maybe 5 or 6 from the northern region. So you had equity here. With the dual regime, same thing. So one of the reasons why we're fighting to obtain our independence, because we lacked equity in this union that was forced on us, particularly under this current arrangement. It took a lot of pushing to get people like the Atangangis and others appointed. But nonetheless, we all of us know that Atangi is not a Southern Cameroonian. From his policies and politics, we know he's not a Southern Cameroonian. So we are fighting to break away because there has been no equity, no balance, no fairness in this union that was imposed on us. So in the days of between 1954 and 1972, we had near self-sufficiency in economic governance, in political governance. There's data that shows that we had near to full employment. Every person who finished college, before you finish college, you had employment waiting for you. Before you finish even primary school, you had jobs waiting for you. When you got employed, on the 1st of the month, by the 30th of the month, you had your paycheck on your table. It's brought to you on your table. Unlike in the current regime where you will work for a year, 2 years, no salary. I was a victim of this regime. I was employed in 1974. I did not get my first paycheck until 1977. So I worked for about 3 years. I spent time in Chang, in Yaoundé, in Douala, with no pay. It was one of the frustrations that got me to abandon the regime and leave, come out, go to the US for further studies. And so in the Southern Cameroons government, governed entirely by indigenous Southern Cameroonians, there was equity, there was efficiency, and in both in the public and private sectors. Now, in the private sector, right after independence, we had indigenous entrepreneurs who were building our infrastructures. People like the Chase, the Nangas, the Kilos, the Mignolis in Boya, the Atabong enterprises, all native Southern Cameroonians, building roads, building highways, doing import-export, and providing, creating jobs. All of us have heard and read about Cameroon Bank, which was one of the well-funded banks in not just in Southern Cameroon, but in the whole region, that provided capital to entrepreneurs. But fast forward to today, you see, 60 years after independence, we still depend and rely on foreigners to come build our roads. You have what? Now, for anybody who was in Cameroon in the past 5 to 7 years, there's a bridge between Douala town and Bonaberi. That bridge took about 7 years to build, and built by who? By the French and the Chinese. Almost every road in Cameroon today, the builders, the contractors are foreigners. And this is a country that has been independent since more than 60 years ago. They are unable to develop a pool of indigenous entrepreneurs, a pool of engineers who could build roads and bridges. Meanwhile, in 1960, 61, we already had native-born entrepreneurs, native-born engineers who were building highways, roads, bridges. And had we not been brought into this unfortunate union, I assure you, that by today, almost every road in Southern Cameroons would be tarred. Almost every highway in Southern Cameroons would be tarred, including roads into villages, into the remote areas and farm to market. Why? Because we had what you call balanced development. We're developing on all fronts in transportation, agriculture, energy, power, you name it. We had this farming, industrial farming investments in places like the Wada, Santa Coffee Estate, Mamfe, Boya, and Ekona, research on all fronts. So we had an economy that was growing in all its sectors. Transportation, in the 60s, up until the late 60s, you could go to Nigeria by boat from Mamfe, and goods were transshipped from Nigeria to Mamfe, and Mamfe to the rest of the country. And in the early 1960s, Nigeria, Mamfe was more or less the commodities capital of Southern Cameroons. Mamfe was the center of trade for Southern Cameroons. Why? Because it was located at the border between Nigeria and Cameroon. So most goods that were imported from Nigeria were transshipped through Mamfe. There were warehouses in Mamfe. Goods got there. Some were transshipped to Kumba and then on to Tiko and Limbe. Others were shipped to Bamenda and on to Kambe. And people used to come even from Bafsam to buy goods in Bamenda. And some would continue on to Mamfe, buy goods in Mamfe. So had we not been brought to become part of this unfortunate union, Mamfe would today be, I would say, the Chicago of West Africa. The Chicago of West Africa. Chicago today, we know, all of us know, is the commodities capital of not just the US, but of the world. The prices for cocoa, coffee, and other commodities are determined in Chicago, in the Chicago's futures market. So that's what Mamfe would have become had we not been misguided to join this unfortunate union. Not to mention what Tico and all of us know that between 1954 and the early 60s, there was an international airport in Tico, an airport that had direct flights to London, to Accra, to Kenya, and to Lagos. And students who studied in Europe flew out through Mamfe. The story is well known about the Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, who flew to Mamfe, and to Tico, was received, welcomed by Funcha. And so today, everything's gone, abandoned, neglected, and just like the rest of us. So we have to stay focused. We have to remain steadfast. If we don't fight to achieve our reacquire our golden era, we would be we would remain forever slaves in this current arrangement. So I am, as was said in that introduction, I will never again step foot in Cameroon unless I'm going to a Cameroon that is our neighboring state. Unless I'm flying back into either the Chico airport, into the Bamenda airport, or into the Manfi Airport. So, any questions?
Thank you, Prof, for that lesson on Southern Cameroons between 1954 and where we are today. It's a very important background which we of a generation that didn't exist then and are yet fighting for liberation need to know. Like they always say, we can't know where we are going if we don't know where we are coming from. It's one of the most important lessons we've had at this town hall, 48 editions in. I think before we take questions, we usually take questions in a series. I don't know if you want to jot them down, so it's not one question, one answer. It drags out. We will take them in a batch of about 5. You answer them, and then we take another lot, and then maybe we have an open discussion. Francis, my co-moderator.
Yeah, we have 3 hands open up, and then the chat forum is also open if persons want to ask. I think we have Pafru, Mr. Charles Agwo, and Dr. Daniel, I would assume, Dr. D. Pafru.
Thank you again once more. And I want also to thank Tata Fobanjong and all of you who know my background. You should understand why I call him Tata. And I think this town hall has actually ignited the spirit that was in me growing up in the village, where around the fireside, I would sit with my grandparents. They will be telling stories of how it used to be. And I want also to commend the Secretariat for this particular program. I think it is very, very powerful. As the moderator said earlier, if you don't really know where you are coming from, you would not definitely know where you are going to. And I would also, listening to Tata Fobanjong, it just supports the saying that what an old man can see sitting down, a young man cannot see standing on the tallest tree, because he sees with years of experience. Okay, the question I would like to ask Tata is that you've given us how life was, and I would like also for you to tell us what, and you work at La République, what strategy did La République use during the Makiza era that it's being replicated now? And what lessons can you, living through that period, message can you give to our people on the ground, and mostly our fighters, to guide them to prevent some of this senseless killing that our people are going through on the ground?
Maybe we'll take two more questions.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul, for the discussion. Right. I just want to ask if you agree with me that power changed hands easily in the Southern Cameroons because of the system, because it was a parliamentary system. And we know that the prime minister doesn't have a lot of power as compared to a president wielding a lot of power. If it was a presidential system, one greedy individual can just dig in, surround himself with his own military, like we see in Cameroon, create his own special forces and all those kind of things, and can stay in power for forever. So I think it's a system in place. Because we're also seeing that in the revolution now, people just have a scent of power, just a slight scent of power. They're digging in. Now, the second other question that I want to ask you is, do you think that our people were a little bit naive to walk straight into a centralized system of governance after they've had a liberal system of doing things where power is decentralized? And you go to join people who were not even independent. They were not fully independent country. Because even today, they are not still independent. They don't have economic independence. You know, their foreign reserve means they sell cocoa abroad. The money goes straight into France, the French central bank, and they can only get 15% of that. You know, they were a little bit naive to walk into that kind of system. Because France is a centralized state. So they copied from there, and they have never been free ever since.
Thank you, Comrade Charles.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to appreciate Power for taking out the time to come talk to us today. And this is something that moving forward should be encouraged. We're so grateful for this opportunity. One of the things we have learned with the successes of governments here in the Western world is the principle of the incrementalism. They build on the little stuff and they don't destroy their foundation or their history. They build on it and they move forward like that. So I believe that what they and the Funchas and the Endeles they build is something that we have to search for and just continue to work on it until we get to where we want to go. But my question this morning is that was there any political advantage for our people to continue to move gradually and cementing their relationship with La République du Cameroon, given that they saw what was happening in Nigeria and they had the audacity to walk out? Were they not also able to stop at a particular level to continue to sink into the arrangements they had with La République, given that they were already seeing some of these things that were disappearing in their very own, before their very own eyes? Could they not have stopped at a particular point? Or were they coerced into, going further and deeper into what we have today? Or was there any hidden political advantage that we don't know? So I want Pat to kind of touch on that, because we have heard so many stories, but we don't know why these brave men that we saw coming from Nigeria became the bravery kind of disappeared, and we just saw them taken like sheep to the slaughterhouse of La République. So that's my question this morning. Thank you.
Let me power through. Your question was about the strategy the French, the ideal regime used during the Makiza war against the Bamilekis and the Bassas. The sad point about this war, the Makiza war against the Bamilekis, was the British and the UN knew that French Cameroon was at war, that there was a civil war going on in French Cameroon. The UN knew this, yet gave us the option to become independent by joining French Cameroon or by joining Nigeria, knowing fully well that there was an ongoing civil war in French Cameroon, knowing fully well that French Cameroon's so-called independence was actually not quite consummated. They were still struggling, they were still fighting for independence. The Umnyobes, the Wanji Rollands, they were still fighting to achieve independence for French Cameroon. The UN knew this. Why they would allow us, why they would give it as one of the options for our independence, it defeats my imagination. Now, so here we are, forced to vote to join a country that was facing or going through a civil war. Then we, of course, not realizing at the time that the strategies used against the Bamilekis would in the future be used against them. And what were those strategies? They were the scorched earth, burning down of villages, cutting off people's heads and putting them on street corners, on crossroads, using scared tactics, using tactics that would scare the populations, intimidate them, and get them, So they would go into villages and I'm sure you've read about this, heard about this. The French were using the same strategies that they used in Vietnam. They actually use napalm bombs that would destroy trees and deforest many parts. One of the reasons why the Bamileke land is mostly savanna today is because napalm was thrown in many of the villages there to force the fighters out into the highways, into the streets along places like Penja and Banga, down up to Kosamba. So force them out of their hideouts in the forest, and napalm was used, and villages were burned down, and that forced one of the reasons why the Bamilekes today, a large number of Bamilekes today are into trading and commerce, is because their farms were destroyed. They were denied, the right to stay in their villages and farm in their villages because those villages were destroyed. You fast forward to today, they're using the same tactics in Southern Cameroons. They've burned down, more than 500 villages. And their strategy is to force us to run away from those villages, force us to stop food production, force us to become refugees in their territory, and so that we would, in the end, be forced to surrender, just as it did with the Bamilekes, because in the end, it forced the Bamilekes and the Bassas to surrender. So it is a textbook repeat of what they did to the Bamilekes. You go to Bamenda today and to Mamfe, and you don't, much of the food that's there is imported. There are days, the UN, I think the UN Food, FAO, I think the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, and other NGOs, once a week, they go into villages and distribute rice. And it's happening now. This is a region of the country that used to export food. People used to come from Gabon, from Chad, Central Africa to buy food in Southern Cameroons. People will come even from Nigeria to buy food in Southern Cameroons. Today, we're dependent on handouts from NGOs and from, so this is a textbook strategy designed to create famine, to force us to abandon our farms, our villages, and come and live in Yaoundé and get rid of the youth, fight, so that in the end, we would become entirely dependent on them. Now, so for the second question, parliamentary system, the power change sounds so easily because we were a parliamentary system. Of course, naturally, in a parliamentary system, the power is with parliament. The power is with the electorate. Parliamentary systems are inherently more democratic than presidential systems. The European democracies are actually more democratic than the American presidential system, because in a parliamentary system, you can easily call for a vote of no confidence. You can force the government to call for new elections. You can cause the government to collapse. There's greater accountability. There's greater transparency. Every member of parliament has the power to question and to challenge the prime minister. The prime minister, of course, is just one amongst all of the ministers, and so he is now a co-equal to an extent. Unlike in presidential systems where the president, in most cases, particularly in the Francophone system, comes across more like a demigod. A demigod. The Bias and the Aijos, they are more or less worshipped as superhumans. That's not the case in parliamentary systems. That's not the case in Britain, in Southern Cameroons. And so no law was passed in Boya without vigorous debate. Unlike in the French regime today, where all the laws come from Biya, go to Parliament, Parliament just claps and approves it and go back, he signs. Laws were debated, people got on the floor and challenged the Prime Minister. They would say no to the Prime Minister. And unless a majority of parliamentarians voted to pass a bill, it will not pass. But in today's, yes, you don't need, there's no case in which in Yaoundé where a parliamentarian is allowed to sponsor a bill in Yaoundé. In our days, in Southern Cameroon, every member of parliament could put a bill in parliament and it would be debated and passed. But in today, all the laws in Cameroon are passed or come from Bia's desk. And so it was a lot easier to look at the options and to get parliament to accept to achieve independence by joining French Cameroon. Now, this ties in with the third question, where was there any political advantage to join French Cameroon, or whether we were coerced? We joined French Cameroon because we had no other option. The option with Nigeria was a no-no because we'd had the experience of sharing governance with them. It didn't work out. So we didn't want to repeat the mistake again. So joining French Cameroon was a novelty, So let's give it a try. Most importantly, we thought we had more with French Cameroon than with Nigeria. Culturally, people in the northern zone share the same culture, more or less, with people in the western province. And in the southern region, people in the southern region had shared the same culture with people in the Sawa, Mbo, and the like. And so we thought that we were voting to join our brothers who have the same culture and sometimes the Mbos in Kumba and the Mbos in Konsambas, they speak the same language. You go to Mbunda, people in Mbunda and people in Santa, they speak and understand one another. So we thought we'd simply, going back to people with whom we had same culture in pre-colonial times. Now, we did not know about the Bulus. In voting to join with French Cameroon, we knew very little about the Bulus. Why? Because the Douala, the Sawas were more or less a buffer between us and the Bulus. They were so distant, so far away geographically from us, and even culturally from us, that we didn't know much about them. The only thing we knew about the Bulus, the Betis, in the 50s and 60s was that there was a tribe called Chop Brokpot. So we didn't know what that meant. And we thought we would share the same culture with the Bamilekis. We were joining to share the same culture with the Sawas, not realizing that there was a group hidden behind that would someday acquire power and then do to us what Hitler did to the Jews. Because that's exactly what BI is doing. Yeah. The strategies and the scorched earth killings that is doing now is very much similar. The difference is that is not Hitler did his killings in gas chambers. Bia is doing his in villages, in our hideouts, killing children 5 years old, killing grandmothers in their 90s. And it's not much different from what Hitler did to the Jews. And had we known that there was a tribe, that there were people this hateful, this different from us, we would not have voted to join French Cameroon, not in the least. Maybe we would have chosen to go back to Nigeria, but not to join a people who would be so callous, so hateful. And so at this stage, looking back, we cannot entirely blame our founding fathers, the Fonchas and the Joas, and we cannot, there have been cases where people ask, why did they do this to us? And these were people they were all from humble backgrounds. They not had the experience of living abroad, studying abroad, or in post-World War Africa, between 1945 and 1960, what some colonial powers did was they took citizens in their colonies and made them members of parliament in their countries. You see people like Senghor was parliamentarian in France, Houphouët-Boigny was parliamentarian in France. So they gave them some basic exposure to democratic governance, modern governance, and the like. Our leaders didn't have that privilege. They were not given that privilege. The Fonchas and the Munas and the Joas and the Endelis were not given the privilege to go and spend maybe 6 months or even a month in the British Parliament to observe and see how laws were debated, how laws were passed and the like. So these were people who were learning by trial and error. They're practicing democracy by trial and error. And they did well. They did well when they were, when they had autonomy. When they had autonomy between 54 and 72, they did well. They were an envy. They became an envy of other countries in the region. And if French Cameroonians are honest, they would tell you that they envied our system. They envied the Fonchas, the Endelis, and the Munas and the Joas, because it was the only country in sub-Saharan Africa where power transited 3 times without coup, without argument, without And you may also have read that on the trip to Fobanjong, Ndeli and Foncha and all of those founding leaders, they went in the same vehicle. They traveled together. And they were members of different political parties. They would go to political campaigns, and at the end of the day, they go and eat together, they dine together. So they were not enemies, they were political adversaries, and they had the country's best interest at heart, the people's best interest at heart. They always would come back together, work together in the best interest of Ambazonia. That's not the case with French Cameroon. When Aijo was in power, every other person in the country, every other political leader in French Cameroon was an enemy. Same with Biya. Biya comes to power. Every opposition leader, Francophone or Anglophone, was seen as a political enemy. That should be either arrested, should be forced out, or So the French culture and the French political system does not tolerate opposition, does not allow, does not believe in the politics of live and let live, in the politics of alternation, that you could govern for 5 years, 10 years, and then step aside and allow somebody else come to power. You look at almost every French country in Africa, power has always transited either through coup d'etat or through passing down the rule to a son or to a self-appointed successor. Aijo appointed his successor in in what I think Senegal, the power was arranged, handed down to somebody who was vetted by the French. That's not the case in English-speaking Africa. So it's unfortunate. The events that we've experienced, the experience that we've gone through with French Cameroon, makes us believe that we must fight. It makes us believe that we're on the right course. It makes us believe that we must not give up. There's only one end in sight, and that end is victory for Southern Cameroons.
Thank you, Prof, for those elaborate answers, which have only added more light to your earlier presentation. We have a